to Director Grenny, I think you're on. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so we're going to get started. So welcome to the Finance Committee for the Thompson Regional District. I'd like to call this meeting to order for today, February 21st at 1:30. And I would like to pass it over to our corporate officer to do the election for chair and vice chair.
Thank you, CAO Hildebrand. So as set out in the Local Government Act and the TNRD Board of Directors Procedure Bylaw, we will now carry out the election of chair for the Finance Committee. The successful candidate will serve in the position until mid-2026. Nominations will be called 3 times. As candidates are nominated, they will be asked if they consent to the nomination. Nominations will then be closed. If there is only one consenting candidate, that candidate will be acclaimed as the chair. If there are 2 or more consenting candidates, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to say a few words if they wish before the ballots are distributed. I will now call for nominations for the position of chair. Director Hall.
I'd like to put forward the nomination of Margot Middleton, Director Middleton.
Director Middleton, do you consent? Thank you. Second call for nominations for the office of chair. And third call for nominations of the office of chair.
Am I able to nominate anybody?
No, because you are not an official, like an appointed committee member.
Thank you.
I declare the nominations closed for the office of chair, and Director Middleton is acclaimed chair. Congratulations. Director Hall?
I'd like to nominate Director Laird as vice chair, if I could.
Director Laird, do you consent to the nomination? Director Laird consents. Are there any other calls or nominations for the appointment of vice chair? And final call for nominations. Okay. I declare the nominations closed for the office of chair, and Director Laird is appointed or acclaimed. Congratulations.
I'll pass it over to you, Chair Middleton. If you would like to do the acknowledgement and we can get started.
Thank you. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting for February 21st, 2025. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nations communities across our vast regional district, and today are located on Taxation territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with the Taxation and respect the territory and the land on which we gather today. Call for any additions or deletions to the agenda. None seen. Do I need to ask for approval of the agenda? Okay. I wonder if I can please have a recommendation on 5.1, or I move the recommendation 5.1 that the minutes of the Finance Committee dated October 16, 2024 be adopted as circulated. Can I have a second? Seconded by Director Hall. All those in favor? That's carried.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. I just had a question. How are we filling the 2 spots that were originally on the committee? Wasn't it the 2 directors, one from Sun Peaks and one from Barrier, was it? So how are we, who's getting reappointed? Do you know yet?
Nobody's getting reappointed. Their space will remain until the by-election occurs, and their councils have appointed the directors to that committee.
Okay, so there won't be a change in the original committee then?
There will be no vacancies, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for the clarification. I'd like now to invite a delegation up. We do have today representing the firm of BDO Canada LLP, Mr. Mario Piroddi. If you would like to give us your presentation, appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chair Middleton. Thank you for having me here today. We're here today to discuss the audit for the 2024 fiscal year of Thompson-Nicola Regional District, and we can also include the hospital district as well. You would have had in your package our planning report. However, given that we actually are on site and my team is down the hall somewhere working away, I was hoping to have more of a conversation today. And if there's any questions on the report, I'm happy to answer them. But the purpose of this is to ensure that the committee has had a chance to discuss the audit plan, and if there are any areas that you feel that we should be made aware of, or if there are any areas in particular that you want to ensure that we are focusing on, this is the committee's opportunity to do so. So as in prior years, our audit has commenced now, and we're planning to finish by the end of next week our actual in-field testing, and at that point our quality review will be underway, and then also the preparation of the financial statements. The target is to be at the March 27th board and hospital district meetings to present the final statements, and that will be the date where we will conclude the audit and sign off. In terms of the audit plan this year, there aren't very many deviations that we have from what we were doing last year. And when we look at the risks for the regional district, the main areas of focus, or the highest risk areas that we're looking at this year, are going to be, of course, still looking at management override controls. So looking at how the systems can be circumvented for an advantage of any senior management person, and also looking at directors as well to make sure that we still have that, the adjudication of expenses properly. And then the next area that we'll be looking at is capital projects with the capital spends that have been happening, and obviously more high profile spends that have been underway. We'll be looking at those areas in particular, not just looking at, okay, did we have this $1,000 invoice allocated to the right project, but looking at your tendering process, your procurement, adherence to budgets throughout the process to make sure that we're satisfied that the policies are being followed, not just that the spends are accurate. So we look at that from two perspectives. The other large area is your revenues. We do spend a lot of time in the revenues just because of the complexities, in particular with the regional district, with the service areas, making sure that the allocations have been done properly, because obviously that flows into your reserves and surpluses, which we know need to be tracked separately, but also looking at just the funding agreements. And we're seeing a pattern right now where the province is definitely making it harder to adjudicate how grants should be recognized and how the funds need to be spent. So we want to make sure that those are being done properly so that the reporting that goes into the province doesn't cause issues down the road as well. So those are the main areas that we're going to be looking at. Obviously, we'll still be looking at your payroll, your expenses, and looking at all those items on your balance sheet, whether it's the cash, the receivables that you have. But those are going to be the largest areas of focus for this year. Question for the committee, are there any areas that you have concerns with, or you feel that we should be focusing on as part of the audit that I haven't touched on?
Thank you. See, Director Grenier has his hand up if you'd like to proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Mario, I'm just wondering your thoughts on a page that shows current investments of the surplus amounts. I'm thinking often in financial statements, they detail, say, the top 10 investments if you're dealing with a financial company. And I think we have such a sizable surplus that a page dedicated to what our investments are in might be appropriate, given we're bringing focus to surplus policy and investment policy. I wonder what your thoughts are on that. Thank you.
Okay. Through the chair to Director Grenier. So we do have in the financial statements, there are required disclosures on your investments. This is governed by the financial instrument standard. And so there are details of where the investments are. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what your mix of investments are, but you know, if you have the money market funds through Municipal Finance Authority, and then you have investments in their bond fund, and then some GICs, as well as that'll all be detailed in the notes, and there'll be disclosures around your exposure to interest rate risk and those types of things. So that is there. I'll also speak just as an aside that, you know, with this year having been a stable staff year and no staff turnover in finance, the management has been turning their heads to how we can improve disclosures in the financial statements, not just hitting the required amounts. So there will be some changes that they proposed. Our manager met with your manager of finance yesterday to kind of go through what some of those changes are. So there will be some enhanced disclosures coming, but we do have those disclosures in there that you were asking for.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Good.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll move on then to under reports, 7.1. And I don't see a Fox here, so I'm thinking that perhaps Austin is going to present this. Thank you for coming in.
So for the Q3 variance analysis, I mean, obviously, as Mario's alluded to, we're right in the cusp of audit where we've already closed our 2024 books. This Q3 variance analysis comes to you as part of our commitment to bring forward the variances that existed in the prior periods, and to also express to you assurance that we are going through the variance. We're looking at where the variances are, and we're planning ahead for the future. In the next presentation where we talk about the taxation impact, there's a little section in there that you'll see where some of the changes that occurred between draft and final are going to be as a result of us reviewing these variances in advance and managers making choices based on those variances. So I don't want to spend too much time talking. I'll open it up to any discussion or questions that you might have had as you went through that report, or anything that you may need clarification on.
Do we have any members here at our table with questions, comments? Good. There don't appear to be any, so we'll carry on. Thank
Chair
you.
Middleton, it was just, that report is simply just a tool that we use, as you said, and we will do that every quarter of the year. We actually do that with internally as well, by department, by service, so it's very helpful. And for what it's worth, and I know it's a bit of off topic, but I guess there was just an earthquake in Vancouver and Lower Mainland right now at 5.0 or 4.9. So everything seems to be okay. We just got the emergency alert, so it was through our emergency team.
Any tsunami warnings or anything like that that go along with this so far? Nothing yet. Oh, we'll be keeping our eyes on that for sure. Hopefully, there's no impact that's felt anything other than maybe a few rattling dishes. Okay, we will move on to 7.2, 2025 tax implications anticipated. And again, I believe this will be put forward by Austin as well. So if you'd like to bring that report forward, thank you.
Thank you. So just let the presentation get up there. Okay. Oh, hey, my name's on this one. Cool. So I know that Carla likes to do the parking lot for board suggestions. I'm going to embrace that that philosophy. I think it's a good idea to take any questions you might have, just wait till the end. There's a good chance I might answer some of them. If not, absolutely, we'll go through them at the end. So some of the stuff that we already know about, we had the CUPE negotiated wage increase. We had the BCGEU negotiated wage increase. Those are always going to be the largest component of any budget. Wages are significant and we have a lot of staff. The exempt wage and the board increase is also going to be a component of that. We have the new facilities manager position that was approved. We have the asset manager position that is hopefully going to be filled very soon. And then there's the ERP system implementation, which a component of that is going to be the actual software and the licensing, and a component is going to be the coverage staff that are needed during that implementation. Since provisional, there's a couple of new things. The EA directors all moved forward a motion to take that recreation reserve and draw that down over the next 3 years. So you'll see a pretty steep decrease in the taxation required for the electoral areas as a result of that change. At the year end, this is what I alluded to a moment ago, with managers reviewing their variance, we were able to make some smart choices and reduce expenses where possible to help our surpluses. In the solid waste budget, and also not noted here, but the development services budget as well, we took the interest that was earned on the reserve and kept it in the service to help with the lack of revenue that we were expecting. That's the reduction in solid waste fee revenue and also the building permit revenue. Solid waste, the fees ended up coming in slightly over what we were anticipating. So that actually helped a little bit. It's about $100,000. That reduction in line that has nothing next to it was supposed to coordinate with the surplus adjustment. In the library, we had to slightly increase the transfer to reserve. That is just to cover off future capital projects. We actually do have a report that's coming to you at the next board meeting that will help a little bit with that, but I won't spoil anything, just some grant funding. And then there was the 2 new positions for the Aberdeen Tiny Library that were approved. So when we look at the net requisition and the comparison to 2024, we're looking at overall a 5.71 increase. Again, that is the global number. To the region as a whole, we're taxing 5.71% more, but to an individual, that means quite little because it all depends on what services they're specifically paying into. Here is the overall taxation requisition by municipality. This one does mean a little bit more. You can see across the board, we're looking at overall a 6.49% increase. Some of these are quite a bit increased, like Lytton, for example, where we know that there's been a lot of development in Lytton over the last year. Their piece of the pie is going to be a little bit higher than it was last year by 20%. Here's the electoral areas change overall. Again, this is quite a bit lower, and that's big in part due to that park reserve that we're drawing down over the next 3 years. That's why this is coming in at 4.35%. And in some of the areas, actually, there's even a decrease in tax compared to last year, like E&I. One thing you'll see that you might notice here is Area O is considerably increased over last year, a 15.5% increase. When looking at the assessment change from 2024 to 2025, there's a significant increase to both residential and to industrial, the utilities. We believe that that's due to the pipeline. Looked like the pipeline was included in the assessment for this year. So that's why you're seeing such a large increase there. And then that top line there, that 2.79 million, that's the specified services. So that's a ton of different lines that go into that one. And as a single number doesn't mean a ton, but contributes to our overall global tax increase of 5.71. Here is the overall requisition change with the cost per thousand. You can see the actual percent changes here. Some of the ones that are a little more significant, again, is Lytton's gone up quite a bit. Area O has gone up quite a bit. We have a couple that are actually decreasing. Here is similar data, but this is all based around the average residential home assessment. So something that's really interesting here that I wanted to touch on, and a good example of this is, let's say Area B. So on the previous slide, you can see that Area B's requisition has gone up overall. But when we look at the average tax that a resident is paying, Area B has actually gone down by 20 cents per the average. So how does that happen? So I want to touch on that really briefly because it's kind of an interesting concept and it's a little bit complicated. So there's a few pieces that go into how a requisition can go up, but a tax assessment per person can go down. So Part of that would be because of new development in an area. So if you think about it, if you have 5 people paying into a tax assessment and then a new house is built and now you have 6 people, that change from 5 to 6 people paying into an assessment means you're paying the same taxes, but spread over more people. The other piece to that reduced the taxes, and you see that in development of the pipeline, for example, where the industrial class of properties pays 3.5 times, or sorry, 3.4 times more per dollar than a resident pays. So if you have a large development where everything goes up, but also residential goes up the same as what the industrial would go up, the average that a resident is paying is going to go down because of that increase to the industrial portion. So we saw a lot of that in some of these areas where there was either new properties added to the service establishment, or we had an increase in the industrial side that's paying a larger contribution to the taxes. And so that's why you see a lot of those taxes actually are going down. Here's the overall increase of the converted assessments for just residential. So you can see over on the far right there is the percent change compared to the overall. As expected on here, Lytton's portion has gone up quite a bit. Everyone else is relatively similar. Ashcroft had more relative development than the other areas this last year, so they've gone up compared to everybody else. This is the electoral areas. I've kept the total for municipalities in there just so you can see it, but again, it's about what we expect. O has gone up relatively more than the others with the addition of the pipeline and residential growth. This is just an example of what Carla likes to call the menu of services for City of Kamloops. This is the different services that Kamloops is participating in, what the requisition in, and how much the cost per 1,000 for each of those services ends up being. And this is what electoral area A would look like. So obviously there's quite a bit more in terms of services that the electoral area is paying into, because with a municipality would provide a lot of services, whereas, as you know, with an electoral area, we are providing those services. And then here's the electoral services. It was just a little bit too big to fit on that one page. And you can see on there the recreation for area A, that decrease, that's the reserve drawdown where it's reducing taxation. And that's in here as a separate line because it is a refund of that taxation money to taxpayers. And that's pretty much it. If anybody has any questions about that.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll start. I don't know if anybody else has any questions or of course, topic of the day, and with what we are seeing with our budgeting going forward, have we enough built in? And I know reserves is a hot topic, and we saw where we'd actually had the electoral areas of, to sort of use reserves to decrease taxation. Is this going to come back to bite us when we look at what's happening with the economy coming forward with the possibility of tariffs or some of the unrest that we're seeing in the economic side of things? Have we got any kind of a cushion built in? Do we have any sense of what might be ahead of us by way of our purchasing, and where we're dressed up, what projects we have in the pipeline right now that are going to be or possibly be affected by increased costs?
That's a really good question. So there's a few parts to that I'll touch on. The first part was whether drawing down these reserves will ultimately have a negative impact on us. And I think in any situation, having a reserve is always a good thing, and drawing it down is always short-term gain for, in some cases, long-term pain. We see a direct benefit from that right now as we draw down those reserves. And there's always the possibility in the future, for example, with the parkland strategy that we're coming up with, that we might say, man, sure wish we had some reserves right now that we could draw on. But we can't ultimately know if we're going to need those or not, and giving that money back to taxpayers now may be the better choice, and keeping it may be the better choice. There's really no way to know which is the right answer. In terms of having a cushion for the future, right now we're in a position where some services do have healthy reserves and some are struggling. A great example of that is our water systems, where more money would be great. Recently, the Policy and Governance Committee did approve Carla's new reserve and surplus policy. And part of that policy is directly to address what you're talking about, where we want to have a minimum threshold that's required for a reserve to feel healthy, which part of that is to fund up to 2 months of operating costs in case of an emergency. And part of that looks at all these future capital projects where we have infrastructure now that we maybe don't have a plan in place to repair 50 years down the line. And another component to that too is bringing on this asset manager and this future outlook where the asset manager can help us put together a plan that looks at what assets do we have, what do we have in our reserve, what's our future plan for these, and does it make sense to put in more? Do we need to set aside a little bit of money every year? How do we achieve that level of equilibrium where we're comfortable that our future assets are protected? But ultimately, we try not to make too many assumptions and guesses too far into the future. I think our 5-year outlook is about as far as we want to confidently say this is what we absolutely need, aside from our capital assets that we have expected lifetimes for.
Thank you. COA Hildebrand.
Thank you. I can just add to that. You also specifically asked about the decision the EA's made to take that reserve and apply it to taxation. That is certainly, we don't feel is going to impact us in the future, other than there won't be that credit next year. So taxes will go up. So we'll need to be able to have to explain that within all the electoral areas, but that reserve is no longer being funded, if I'm correct. And it was just a kind of a one-time thing, and that'll show a decrease, but they won't have the luxury of that next year. But everything else Austin said, I think kind of hopefully answered your question, unless you had another question.
No, that was good. Thank you. Director Laird.
Thank you. In my budget, I have a line item called Regional Park Reserve. I don't know what that is. I don't know how that was created, or wouldn't that go to the new committee as far as regional parks?
I'd have to look at which reserve you're talking about, because there would be a park dedication reserve.
Yeah, I've got one of those. I've got a
Yeah,
park
so
dedication.
park
and-
dedication is very specific to that's funding that we would receive in lieu of a developer donating
Yes.
land. And so there's specific uses for that funding that essentially can only be used to buy new park property.
Yeah.
So that's one piece. Separate from that is regional parks, which is a service that's funded by all municipalities and electoral areas, is a single service that does have a single reserve fund. We've actually drawn on that reserve to fund the Parks and Trails strategy. The board approved $100,000 to be used towards that process, and there's still reserve funding in there, but it's not allocated to one electoral
so
area. It's for the entire service.
The regional reserve fund is actually used regionally. That's in my budget. I can't remember. I don't have the number in front of me. That's all.
Yeah,
It's just a substantial amount. from what I
Yeah,
understand.
yes, the regional park reserve is attached to the regional park service.
Yeah.
So not one particular
So-
electoral area.
If I understand correctly, right now, we have 2 regional parks. One of them is the Boys in the Thompson River, and there's one on the North Thompson. There's one regional park there that we fund. Is that the 2 that we fund right
Yeah,
now?
there's actually 3,
Okay.
the North Thompson, Little Hell's Gate, and there's one in Barrier, the Barrier Forks, and then the River Boy service.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Austin.
Just supplemental to that too, the amount that's sitting right now in the regional park reserve that's being used for the entrance sign project, that was actually funded through the COVID relief reserve as well. So that wouldn't have come from taxpayer money. It was something separate.
Thank you. Any other questions? None seen. Thank you very much for the presentation. Oh, just a second. One more.
I've been sitting on the board for quite a while, and I'm really impressed with the information that we now have when we look at a budget and our reporting, and it improves every year, and it's great to see. It was quite interesting previous years. We were basically passing the budget in block. This amount of money for that, and the process that we have now, and the ability to actually look at each EA directors and municipal funding, it's so much easier to understand. And it does give you the opportunity to ask questions. And I never mean my questions to be I guess you'd call it, the favorite word is derisive. I'm just asking for information. So, and it's not meant to be derisive at all. I just have questions that I need answering, and now I can ask questions. Before I had no idea. So thanks for all your work.
Thank you. Do any of our committee members have any new business that they want to bring forward? None seen? Anything from staff at all? None seen? We're adjourned. Thank you very much.